Prime Minister, as usual, you would expect us to be on top of our brief. We know that you're on top of your brief, so we don't need the background to every answer. I'm sure you'll just answer the questions that we're asking, and if not, we'll chivvy you along.
Keir Starmer walked into this grilling with one task: answer the questions directly. No room for political theatre, no chance to hide behind committees or future reviews, just straight answers. But what we saw instead was a masterclass in avoidance. Time and again, rather than delivering direct commitments, Starmer leaned on vague reassurances, distant timelines, and process-heavy excuses. The pattern was clear. When asked for substance, he provided feelings. When challenged on poverty, he discussed future reports. When pressed for immediate action, he promised growth in time. But how did he manage to say all this with a straight face? Let's find out. Starmer had a chance to define what Britain under his leadership would look like, yet what he delivered was an exercise in emotional reassurance rather than concrete governance. He framed success in terms of how people feel rather than what measurable changes will occur. There were no figures, no targets, and no clear legislative roadmap, only promises of feelings. People should feel better off, feel safe, and believe the NHS is working much better. This is a pattern we've seen before, using positive but vague emotional markers to deflect from hard policy details. For a leader who has been in post for a year and had months to prepare, this lack of specificity is telling. It shows either an intentional avoidance of hard promises or a genuine absence of concrete plans.
But I wanted just to start with you seeing what reflections you've got. You've been in post for a year now, and I wondered if you could give us a quick vignette, a picture of what you think the UK, what you want the UK to look like in 3 years' time after the first term or so of your premiership.
I want people to feel better off, and there has to be a central focus on living standards. I want them to feel, as they will, that the health service is working much better, is there for them and their families in a way that it hasn't been for many years. And I want them to feel safe and secure both in their immediate neighbourhood and as a country, both our borders and national security and defence. So they're the three things that I'm focused on more than anything else, those three things. I want them to feel that we've cleared up the mess that we inherited after the election. It was a huge mess because we had a broken economy and broken public services, and that we're on the road to rebuilding the country.
Okay, thank you. And what about child poverty? What would you like to see as progress on that?
Well, I mean, poverty and tackling poverty and breaking down barriers has to be central to everything that we do. People will not feel better off or safe and secure if we haven't tackled poverty. But I'm very clear in my own mind that we must tackle poverty by putting in the support that is needed, but also break down the barriers to opportunity, because otherwise we won't fix the very deep and complex causes of poverty, and that's why it's central to what we are doing. And it's not a one department issue, it's across all departments because it is so complicated and deep rooted, but it's got to be more than just support to deal with poverty as it is today, but also to put in place the measures to ensure that people can get out of poverty and stay out of poverty. And that's why, broadly speaking, the strategy we've adopted has four limbs to it. The first is to increase income, the money coming into people's pockets, if you like, into their household, to decrease costs to them, to strengthen the local support they have, particularly back into work, but in other ways, and to boost financial resilience. And I'm very proud of the fact that the last Labour government drove down poverty, and I'm determined this government's going to as well.
He says he wants people to feel better off, that the health service is working much better, and to feel safe and secure, and mentions clearing up the mess without detailing what actual policies will deliver these feelings. Even when challenged on child poverty, he only speaks in broad strokes: increase income, reduce costs, strengthen local support, build resilience, with no mechanism or timeline. We already know one of the most revealing patterns in Starmer's responses is how he avoids direct accountability by leaning on process over outcome. Instead of committing to concrete steps that would fix failing housing enforcement or clear legal backlogs, he retreats into management speak about internal stocktake meetings. This is classic bureaucratic deflection, using the language of governance efficiency to avoid promising actual change. It signals either a fear of over-promising or a lack of urgency for those living in unsafe, poorly regulated housing today. That avoidance undermines his broader narrative of people feeling better off, because no one feels better off when their rights depend on a system stuck in a backlog.
Because one of the issues, Prime Minister, you may be aware, is that a number of landlords, including local authorities, are saying that they're struggling in terms of the funding and enforcement to carry out those necessary checks. We've heard that the courts, we know that there's a backlog in the courts in terms of residents bringing forward those cases. So just coming back to that enforceability, Prime Minister, as a lawyer, you know, for anything to be enforceable, it has to have the right protection around it. So just wanting to know if there's been discussions in that interdepartmental discussions to make sure that these cases are escalated when tenants bring them before the courts.
Yes, there have been, and one of the ways in which I've set up the work of government is to have key ministers on key commitments reporting in to me for a stocktake on a regular basis, where we go through progress, what measures are in place, etc. And housing, as you would expect, is one of those. There are 6 areas where we have these regular stocktakes, and housing is one of them. So the Deputy Prime Minister and her team come into number 10. And we have a session where we go through a number of different issues, but decent standards and housing and enforceability is among them.
You can see Starmer emphasises key ministers reporting to me for a stocktake. Housing is one of those areas, which sounds like movement, but commits to nothing for tenants facing immediate legal and housing crises. Starmer repeatedly presents long-term structural fixes as substitutes for immediate relief, and nowhere is this clearer than in his stance on housing allowance. Freezing the allowance has driven families deeper into poverty, and instead of offering short-term protection, he doubled down on the decision while promising that things will eventually improve once more houses are built. But building houses takes years. Struggling families can't wait for construction projects. This shows a fundamental disconnect between Starmer's promises to tackle poverty and the urgency required to deal with policies that actively push people into hardship. His government is essentially telling vulnerable families to hang on and wait, something that doesn't square with his vision of a Britain where people already feel better off.
Okay, you'll recall last time we met, Prime Minister, I asked you about the government's decision to freeze the local housing allowance, and coming back to the issue around child poverty. This is an area which is keeping many children and their families in poverty because they cannot afford the rent. The recent data from the local government association responsible for all councils shows that there's a funding gap of around £7 million over the last 5 years. This is a key area pushing many people more into poverty. So I asked you again, Prime Minister, do you think that that was the right decision from a government that's ambitious on tackling child poverty?
Look, I think I defend the decisions we've made. Obviously, we head into the autumn. We will get to another budget. There'll be a chance to look again across the board. But we certainly made the right decision first time round. I think I'd also emphasise something I touched on last time, which is in the end, with housing, we need to build and make available more housing across the board. There simply isn't enough, and that
but
means
the starts, Prime Minister, you may have seen are quite low. We're not building those houses quickly enough, and we will see more people and more children in poverty. We can't build our way out of this crisis. So in the interim, what more can the government do to help alleviate that poverty?
Well,
that families
as I
are
say,
facing?
there'll be a child poverty strategy which we're setting out in the autumn. We will go into the budget in the autumn as well, and alleviating poverty is a priority of mine. I do think that we need to build more, though, and we have to build more because we've had a problem for many years of not building enough social and affordable housing in this country. And until we crack that problem, we will never be able to get to the fundamental roots of the failures here, and that's why, on that issue in particular, I'm pressing the Deputy Prime Minister very...
Starmer defends the decision as right the first time around and shifts the focus to building more homes, ignoring the immediate funding gap and rent pressures. Before we continue, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive videos on the groundbreaking changes happening in British politics. Let's continue now. Now, when it comes to disabled people, Starmer's government is knowingly taking a gamble that will hurt thousands. The decision to cut the UC health element is projected to push 50,000 newly disabled people into poverty next year alone. That's not a hypothetical, it's based on his own government's figures. Rather than confront the immediate damage this will do, Starmer hides behind an upcoming review and vague promises of working with employers to retain disabled workers. This is a textbook delay tactic. Acknowledge the pain, shift responsibility to a future report, and present minor employer engagement schemes as proof of action. But for disabled families, this isn't policy innovation, it's survival at stake. He claims not every change takes years, yet offers nothing concrete that will protect those affected within the next 8 months.
On that very point, you'll be aware that there is still projections that your government has put forward that estimate 50,000 newly disabled people in April next year will be pushed into poverty because of the reduction in the UC health element of the bill. Now, you mentioned about getting more disabled people into work. Charlie Mayfield, who, as you know, is doing the Keep Looking Working review, not to be published until later this autumn, Prime Minister, has said it will take several years before the labour market changes in order to allow more people to be employed, disabled people to be employed, but also to retain disabled people. So my question to you is, several years, 8 months, what are we going to do to mitigate against the potential pushing of another 50,000 people, disabled people, newly disabled people, and their families into poverty?
Well, I think the Mayfield report is coming in the autumn with the final recommendation, so we obviously need to look at that piece of work, and that is focused, as you know, on what employers can do. I don't accept that everything is going to take years. Some changes do take years, but not all changes take years, and we have to do work in the interim to give that support to those with disabilities.
What specifically had you in mind, given that we've had a disability employment gap for, well over 10 years?
Well, I think there's a lot of work can be done with employers to encourage them to take on and to retain. That doesn't need primary legislation. I've seen pilot examples of it across the country, which I'd like to see many more of, that have been very, very successful. So, yes, I accept that, if you want to pass legislation, it'll probably take some time. I don't accept that every change that is needed, some of them that I've seen for myself have been quite effective, don't need legislation at all, and I think we can get on with that.
When challenged, Starmer said, "We need to look at the Mayfield report. Not every change takes years. We have to work with employers to encourage them to take on and retain. It's vague, employer-focused, and avoids reversing the cuts or adding immediate protections. Perhaps the most damaging blow to Starmer's narrative is economic. Independent analysis shows that the poorest 40% of households will be £1,200 worse off in 3 years under his policies, despite all his promises of feeling better off. Instead of owning this or announcing corrective action, Starmer gives a familiar answer. Economic growth will fix everything, and regional inequality will be addressed in time. But growth isn't a poverty strategy. Without direct redistribution or immediate relief, growth tends to widen inequality rather than reduce it. By leaning so heavily on future economic performance, he's effectively gambling that households on the edge of poverty will hold on long enough for a tide that may never rise. This isn't a poverty strategy, it's political wish casting.
Is the ambition that everybody in our society should feel better off in 3 years' time, including the poorest 40% of households?
Yes.
So you'll be aware of some quite troubling forecasts from, for example, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation that says that, in fact, having looked at all the measures that the government's announced on the table by the summer, the bottom 40% of households are not going to be better off in 3 years' time. They're actually going to be £1,200 a year worse off. So what do you think needs to change between now and the end of the Parliament so that everybody in our society is in fact enjoying higher living standards?
Well, we need to do a number of things. The first is we've got to get much better growth into our economy and create more wealth in the first place. And that's why we've put so much store on ensuring that we took necessary measures at the budget to deal with our inheritance. We then had a spending review which was targeted across the country. This question of making sure that if there is a thriving economy, it's a thriving economy in every part of the country and not just in some parts of the country. And it's why we've already in the spending review focused on things like the living wage, the national wage, and the minimum wage, and ensuring that wages are going up. They've gone up more in the last 10 months. They went up in the last 10 years. So that's the first part. The second part then is the poverty strategy that has to ensure that this is across the whole of society and every location, because in addition, as you all know, to the growth figures, we've had inequality variances across the country, place by place, and we have to have a laser focus on that, because whilst we want more wealth creation and the economy to thrive, and we do and we will, we can't have that as London and the South East and redistribution as a sort of one-word answer for the rest of the country. To my mind, that is fundamentally wrong.
Starmer responds by saying, "We've got to get much better growth into our economy. We focused on things like the living wage and minimum wage. We can't have redistribution as a one-word answer for the rest of the country." It's aspirational language, but it doesn't refute the forecast that millions will be worse off. So, what was this? A leader asked for clarity but delivered only comfort words. Promises were made, yes, but most were built on feelings, future reviews, and long-term hopes, not immediate action. If Starmer can't give straight answers when directly asked, what happens when the stakes are even higher? Let us know in the comments section. Are future reviews and long-term growth just excuses to delay real action on poverty and housing? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to get more updates on British politics and how events are changing it. Until the next video, stay tuned.